When a crime has been committed, any good investigator will ask the question, who benefits? So let's apply this reasoning to the main parties associated with the events of 9/11. Osama bin Laden. 5 days after 9/11, bin Laden stated that he had no knowledge of the attacks. He also stated that the attacks appear to have been carried out by individuals with their own motivation. This statement was aired only once on Al Jazeera TV on the 16th of September 2001.
By the way, Afghanistan's ruling Taliban movement on Tuesday said that Osama bin Laden, they are closely allied with him, was not responsible for the attacks on the United States. What happened in the United States, according to the Taliban, was not a job of ordinary people. It could have been the work of governments. Osama bin Laden cannot do this kind of work. Neither can we, a Taliban spokesman said from the southern city of Kandahar. The Taliban, of course, a very militant and very conservative Islamic organization and widely believed to be harboring Osama bin Laden, a very wealthy Saudi dissident.
There was no word from bin Laden, but the Taliban-ruled government of Afghanistan, where bin Laden is based, issued a statement this morning condemning the attacks and saying bin Laden did not have the capability to carry out such acts. And there were plenty of other suspects, ranging from radical Palestinian groups to rogue governments.
Before 9/11, Osama bin Laden had lived as a fugitive, but he was a wealthy fugitive who had enjoyed relative freedom outside of the USA. He was even able to obtain kidney dialysis treatment at an American hospital in Dubai just prior to 9/11. And within Afghanistan, his country of residence, he was protected by the Taliban, who had full control of the country. However, after 9/11, bin Laden's life became increasingly worse. For example, he was now unable to stay within the comfort zone of Afghanistan because the country had been invaded by the coalition forces. Bin Laden was also unable to freely visit other countries for hospital treatment because those countries would risk being accused of harboring a wanted terrorist. He would therefore have to spend even more of his money on protection, plus his future options would be extremely limited in terms of survival, finding a place to stay, finding the hospital treatment he needed, and planning future terror attacks. Numerous news reports from 2002 stated that bin Laden had in fact died. So when it comes to the question of who benefited from 9/11, on a scale of 0 to 10, Osama bin Laden scores 0. Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was created by the CIA during the 1980s for the purpose of fighting off an attempted Russian invasion of Afghanistan. The CIA funded Al-Qaeda and supplied them with the weapons and intelligence they needed to ward off the Russian threat. When the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan in the late 1980s, the CIA continued to fund Al-Qaeda, and many of its operatives were used as CIA assets. These operatives were used as double agents for use in anti-terrorism drills within the USA and for covert military operations. Since 9/11, Al-Qaeda would have found it almost impossible to carry out major terrorist attacks in countries like the USA. For example, the Patriot Act in the USA allows the government to spy on all phone and email communications. So life for any terrorist organization will have become immeasurably worse since 9/11. In addition to this, the invasion of Afghanistan and the loss of so many of Al-Qaeda's main operatives would have seriously disrupted and undermined Al-Qaeda's ability to function as a terror group in the future. So when it comes to the question of who benefited from 9/11, on a scale of 0 to 10, Al-Qaeda scores 0. Saddam Hussein. Up until 9/11, Saddam enjoyed a relatively comfortable life as the dictator of Iraq. However, since 9/11, Saddam's life had become progressively worse. Firstly, because of the constant insinuations that Saddam had something to do with 9/11, and secondly because of the accusations that Saddam possessed weapons of mass destruction. Within 18 months of 9/11, Iraq was invaded and Saddam was reduced to living in squalid conditions whilst on the run from his invaders. Shortly after the invasion of Iraq, Saddam was captured after he was found hiding in a small underground spider hole in a derelict house in Tikrit. He was held as a prisoner for 3 years before being tried and hanged. The Iraqi court found Saddam guilty of crimes that he committed during the 1980s. So when it comes to the question of who benefited from 9/11, on a scale of 0 to 10, Saddam Hussein scores less than 0. So, out of the 3 parties who've had the finger pointed at them by the Bush administration for complicity in the 9/11 attacks, none of them have benefited politically, financially or strategically from what happened on 9/11. In fact, the exact opposite is the case. The lives of these 3 parties have been turned upside down to the point where they can no longer function as they did before 9/11. So who did benefit from 9/11? Larry Silverstein. This man became the leaseholder of the World Trade Center complex just a few weeks before 9/11. Silverstein faced the daunting task of having to remove the illegal asbestos that covered every steel beam in the Twin Towers. This job would have cost over $1 billion. When Silverstein took possession of the World Trade Center complex, he reworked the insurance policy on the complex to specifically cover terrorist attacks. After 9/11, Silverstein received $7 billion compensation from his insurers. That's a massive profit on his original $15 million investment. So when it comes to the question of who benefited from 9/11, on a scale of 0 to 10, Larry Silverstein scores 10.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the 3rd time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Wat je ziet bij het World Trade Center, dit zijn beelden van gebouw nummer 7.
Ja.
Ja.
Ze hebben gewoon kolommen weggeblazen. Er is nagesprongen. Dus dit is controlled demolition.
Zeker weten.
Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Dit heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Maar dit is ook op 11 september gebeurd.
Dezelfde dag?
Dezelfde dag.
Dezelfde dag? Weet je dat zeker?
Ja.
Nou, dat zeker weten de 11e? Totaal heel waar zijn.
7 uur nadat de World Trade Center naar beneden viel.
Ja? Hebben ze hard gewerkt?